Okay, so anybody who saw my first Reformed video quite clearly knows I love Paul Schrader, and on my ventures to watch all the 2023 movies I can, I finally got around to seeing his most recent work, Master Gardener. Now going into this, I heard a lot from people who were saying that this is the same as First Reformed, and even the card counter, saying that Schrader has resorted to making the same film over and over again. And I was trying my best to not let that hang over my head, and if you heard that too and were putting it off because of that, don't. Because respectfully, I think to say this is the same as Schrader's previous works is a gross reduction of what's actually going on here, so spoilers ahead for this film. This film opens up with some dialogue, and one of the standout lines of this narration is "Gardening is the belief in the future," which is the perfect summation of this entire movie. Though admittedly, a lot of Schrader's contemporary work is operating in the field of redemption, this film is much more concerned with the journey one takes to redemption rather than the stages of before and after. Our protagonist, Narvel, formerly Norton, was a white supremacist and murderer. He accrued a lot of moral debt in this time, and after changing his life around, cooperating with the FBI, he was given a new lease on life. Now typically a film of this nature would hang around with the white supremacy stuff. I mean, naturally, it's juicy and emotionally cavernous material. Take American History X for example. It follows a man on a similar trajectory, but that film drives home the brutality of the events that took place. You could even argue that the entire point of that is to show you the extent of the human condition and how far we can come and change. It's a bold move, but quite frankly, it's also the obvious one. Now, not to take away from that film because it is fantastic, but Schrader clearly doesn't care about that time in Narvel's life. He cares about the story from when that life ended, because I assume to him, and also to me, this is where the most meat is. Now Schrader talks a lot about redemption, but in this film it's through the perspective of paying back moral debt. Not through environmental extremism like in First Reformed, but in a more subdued and simple way. Narvel gets work under a new name with Norma Haverhill, played expertly by Sigourney Weaver. Norma is aware of Narvel's past, and her character seems intrinsically tied to that past. In a way, a sort of lurking reminder. For one, the garden she owns that Narvel runs is on a former plantation with a very prestigious history. It's her family home and she believes in it. It possesses her in some way. Also, she seems very sexually attracted to Narvel's white supremacy tattoos, which are covering his entire body. She instantly mentions Maya's mixed ethnicity and is filled with horror when she hears about their relationship. She even has what I believe is a World War II era Germanic type gun, which obviously has its roots in fascism and racism. So though Norma never seems explicitly racist, she is given tons of subtext to suggest it. Now, given that she is running the garden that Narvel works at, it's quite clear that he can't move on. He has this attachment, this lingering smell of his past all the time. But that's where Maya comes in. Now, of course, the obvious. Maya is black. Well, partially, but that's not really the point. So instantly, this is a question mark. But for all of his wrongdoings and past beliefs, he welcomes her with open arms, seemingly with zero prejudice in his heart. Norma, however, who is considered an upstanding citizen and even relative to Maya, clearly has some prejudice against her. This is possibly pointing at the institutionalized nature of racism, especially in the USA. To the point where successful business people are still profiting and benefiting from the atrocities of before, and though are now appearing to be morally and ethically sound, are actually still harnessing these barbaric and grotesque ways of thinking that are taught and embedded in people from a young age. Now Norma is a classic example of this. She appears sweet and kind-hearted, even having a ethnically diverse staff. Her intentions seem pure, but her subtext and slips of the mind are telling you what is really going on in the background. The haunting mentality is all around Narvel until Maya. Their relationship buds. He sobers her up, he's trying to give her a chance to abstain from losing herself to drugs as he himself nearly did. Then eventually she gets a glimpse of his tattoos. Now, she gets this glimpse whilst he's writing in his diary, which he often does clothed, which implies that he maybe wanted her to see them now, which she even questions him on, but there isn't any real response. She naturally freaks out, but given the circumstances is actually quite calm. She wants to open a dialogue about it because she quite clearly cares for Narvel, and that is where he lets himself down. He remains silent, he remains calm, tranquil, kind of passive, which now is not the time for. She asks him why he never removed them, and he said after considering it he decided not to. Now this could possibly be because he wanted a constant reminder of who he was, which is oftentimes a perfectly natural response. But the issue with it being that there is no capability for entire growth when holding on to a piece of your former self. The torture you put yourself through isn't how you pay back your moral debt, it's actually quite a worthless venture. It doesn't help those harmed prior, it doesn't help you move past it, and it doesn't help anybody in the future. So once Maya comes around and is able to articulate her feelings without being distressed, she goes to his room and undresses before him and then asks him to undress afterwards. This is in stark contrast to Norma, who demanded he get undressed before herself. Then Maya requests he get the tattoos removed, which he complies, showing us his growth, showing us he's willing to move past his personal torture in favour of this adventure. Now there's something to be said for the symbolism of Norma being much older than Maya, indicating a more older way of thinking, whereas Maya is something new and refreshing, a mentality he can nurture but also adopt. But anyway, afterwards they have this surrealism moment which Schrader occasionally likes to fit in, as there is also one in First Reformed, and in this one they drive through the night as flowers and trees instantly blossom before their eyes, this obviously being a metaphor for Narvel's personal blossoming. He's flew straight for a decade, but he wasn't rebuilt. He wasn't born anew, he was still haunted. But in this scene, he also lets out a joyous yell, copying Maya. This is a massive step forward for the man that has been very uptight, well-dressed, structured and tranquil the entire time. And then we move on to the most pivotal moment in the film, the vandalism of Gracewood Gardens. So, they get a call to say that the place has been destroyed and vandalized. This is a response to Narvel threatening RG previously. They spray a Nazi symbol in his room, which sort of suggests that they know who he is or at least what he's about, and from that, I wonder how. I might have missed something here, so if you know, let me know. So anyway, in retaliation, Narvel takes Maya to a party that they're at and threatens them with a gun. He gives the gun to Maya at one point and gives her the option to shoot them. He even bluffs some encouragement and she chooses not to do it, because she represents part of his healing process. He relapses in some form of violence quickly, but then he moves back to Gracewood Gardens in hopes of a new chapter. He informs Norma he intends to live here with Maya as his wife, and though she detests the thought, claiming it to be obscene, it's implied that's exactly what happens. Because only he knows how to rebuild this garden, because like this garden, he has faced a major setback, but like he says, plants rejuvenate, and so do some people. It's a beautiful line delivered eloquently by Joel Edgerton. And he repeats a line in this conversation which he said earlier in the film a few times, which is, "Let's talk tomorrow," or at least some version of it. It's a small and simple line. It can easily be missed or dismissed as filler, but the repeated nature of it is what makes it stick like hot glue, because these are minor instances of Narvel allowing time to heal a thought process. It's a quick glimpse into his mentality, knowing that the moment isn't definite. Looking on something in retrospect is how we understand our situations most, and I think that's quite beautiful. And there's tons of flower metaphors and tons of gardening metaphors that harken to this story that I could get into, but I'm not going to because it would just simply be too much. There is too much subtext in every little moment to do with the gardening that goes towards this idea of moral debt and this idea of rebirth. So I'm going to leave it at just this. This film is a lot more hopeful than First Reformed, even more explorative of redemption arcs, and I think to reduce it to sharing a sort of template is borderline ignorant. On the surface you may find connections, but this film is very sentimental, very forgiving, more vibrant, and First Reformed is cynical, heartbreaking, and visually sterile. So though Master Gardener may be a slightly more inferior film in my opinion, it is still very worthwhile and has its own independent lessons. But that's just what I think. What do you think? Have you seen Master Gardener? If so, let me know what you think of it. Let me know what you think about this video. I read every single comment and reply to as many as possible, and whether it's a sentimental journey from Paul Schrader or not, as always, keep watching movies.